The topic of what I want to cover today is called leading in an uncertain world. How do we lead in a world where there's so much change taking place? And so I'm talking about from an individual and an organizational point of view, how do we in effect accomplish the things that we'd like to do? I want to start this conversation with a quote that I discovered a few years ago that I think really solidifies this question of how do you lead in an environment where we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. The quote is from Alvin Toffler. He's a futurist. And the quote is, "The illiterate of the 21st century will be those that cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. The illiterate of the 21st century will be those that cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." What this slide is really saying, in my opinion, is are you willing to be uncomfortable? Because learning and growth involves doing something when you are uncertain whether or not you will succeed at it. So that's what learning and growth is. I'm going to try, I'm going to attempt, I'm going to do, but I may not accomplish it at a certain level. And so here's the big news flash as we're dealing with the current environment. The world doesn't care that you don't want to change. And so therein lies a fundamental question that we have as individuals, as a community, as people who are here in the workforce, and even thinking about our families. And so the goals of this conversation is to really explore the challenges that you will have, that you'll be facing. And this, I geared this because of my focus on the corporations toward leaderships and boards, but it applies to no matter what size your company is. It applies to any nonprofit you may be involved in, including your church. It applies to all government entities, and quite frankly, to your families and to all of us as individuals, because we're all in this environment where there's this tremendous amount of shift. And the one that's gets the most conversation nowadays is artificial intelligence. But there's just an enormous amount of shifts that are taking place. So what I want to do then is talk about why there's such extraordinary disruption. And it's because we don't know what it is we don't know, and we can't know. What I mean by that is the amount of information that is being generated, or what we call knowledge, is doubling at an exponential rate. Back in 1900, the estimate was that the knowledge in the world doubled about every 100 years. And knowledge didn't travel very fast, right? There was the newspaper that was being transmitted basically by telegraph. And then by 1945, the knowledge in the world was doubling about every 25 years. At that point, you had radio, you had airplanes, you had automobiles. So knowledge in the entire world was doubling every 25 years. By 2018, knowledge was doubling, they estimated, every 12 months. And in 2020, the estimate was that knowledge was doubling every 12 hours. Now, artificial intelligence is now with us, and so I can only imagine that knowledge is doubling, and I'm not going to put a number on it, but it's a heck of a lot faster than every 12 hours because it's being vacuumed up at rates that we can't even begin to imagine. And so if knowledge is doubling at that fast, and you are an individual or an organization, you have to learn at a faster pace than you ever have in the past to simply remain even. And so that means being uncomfortable. You have to be uncomfortable because you're going to learn things. You can't simply rely on that which you have always known. And if you think about the way most organizations operate, they are siloed. There are certain responsibilities that are assigned to certain parts of those organizations. And if they're not in some sort of dynamic conversation across the organization, they're going to miss it because they're not looking at the entire organization. They're just looking at their little piece of it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those sort of challenges and dynamics in a couple of minutes. I arrived at the observations that led to this leading in an uncertain world conversation through the observations that I have been involved in as in my consulting practice. And we've basically uncovered and realized a number of things. Number one is that leaders are failing to proactively react to rapid change. And rapid change is a reality, and it's impacting everybody. The other thing is that most people have a status quo bias. That is, that they really don't like change. We inherently, if you were to consider it, 90% of the thoughts, 90 to 90% of the thoughts that we will have today are the exact same thoughts that we had yesterday. And they're the exact same thoughts that we're going to have tomorrow. In the absence of new information that we're willing to consider, we're going to continue to operate on a business as usual or status quo basis. And in an exponentially growing world, this exposes you to competitive threats and shifts in stakeholder or consumer preferences. So this change is entrenched in the cultural, and it requires a completely different approach to unlock and change the mindset of the individuals, which is really what makes up the culture. So more about our observations, because we've gone into clients and we've explained these sorts of issues to them. And basically what we really have uncovered is a couple of issues or dynamics that play out here. Number one is that CEOs are incredibly uncertain about what to do. And because they don't know what to do, they just don't do anything. And they sit on top of organizations and they don't make any changes. And frequently nobody's asking them to, because everybody's happy with the status quo, even though it's detrimental to the organization. We've seen situations where the CEO recognized the fact that there was a need for change, but their leadership team blocked it because they were fearful of the unknown, or they just wanted to protect their organizational turf. If I'm managing something and you're trying to, in effect, change it on me, I can come up with all sorts of ways to, in effect, attempt to inhibit or limit that. And the larger the organization, and the more organizations are built around consensus, it's incredibly hard to get them to shift without a completely new approach to thinking about challenges. We've also seen situations where the CEO and the leadership team did great strategic work. They, in effect, paid consultants like me, or they did a lot of work themselves to develop a strategy that would move them into the future, but then they just never implemented it. They were, if you will, even required to do it by some sort of a mandate from shareholders or the board, but they're required to do the strategy plan, but they're not required to implement it. And so they know that there are changes necessary, but they don't take the effort, or they don't step out and do it. Finally, there's another scenario where the CEO and the leadership agrees change is necessary, but the organization is so entrenched in an old way of doing things that you've got fights well down into the organization in terms of getting things done. And so they just get stopped in their tracks. Whatever it is the plans are, they haven't at a senior level figured out how to get the buy-in throughout the organization to make change. And I'm sure every one of you who's stopping to think about this can envision some situation that you've worked. It could be a club, an organization. It could be your job. It could even be within your family, where you can say, yeah, I know we should do something different, but man, I can't get the buy-in from everybody to do it. And then frankly, the last component part here is where the strategy or the realization that there was a change was recognized, and the change was implemented. What I'll note frequently here in this scenario is that frequently the workforce has a positive sense of well-being, that they've accomplished something through these shifts. The one thing I have to emphasize with this group of people is that it's not a one-time implementation of a change. Change is coming so dynamically, so rapidly, that you've never accomplished it. You need to be continually looking on the horizon for challenges and for opportunities. And so, um, making this what I'm describing here way more complicated, and it's all tied to this rapid change, is that we've got significant generation gaps in terms of the wants and desires of the boomers, Gen X, compared to millennials, Generation Z, and the group coming behind them is called Generation Alpha. You've got all this social media that is feeding each one of us the information that is biased towards what we want to believe. And so the idea of providing some sort of broader view of what's really happening and what needs to take place is incredibly challenging when everybody's being fed on a daily basis things that confirm that their point of view or what they want or what they believe is in effect valid. And then you finally have such shifts in what consumers and people want that it's crazy. There's a fascinating video out there that looks at the last 20 or 25 years of the automotive industry, and probably um, if you go back 25 years ago, Tesla didn't exist. And 6 or 7 years ago, they came onto the scene and went from being barely a blip on the screen to not only the largest in terms of market value automotive company in the world, but so much more valuable that its value exceeded the next three or four competitors combined. And so this is a classic example that I can offer up in terms of how there can be some profound shifts. So I talked about these workforce gaps, and these go to the recognition that we don't have aside from the difference in perspective by generations, we've got a lack of people to fill all the jobs. We've got an educational system that is not matching up what it's teaching the young people coming up to all the technology that's sitting there. And then we've got what I call global power players, and they're leveraging artificial intelligence and other technologies to capitalize on and influence the populace through social media. And these may be governments, but in many cases, these are just large corporations that are in effect influencing and manipulating the populace overall. So having said all of these things that maybe sound like huge problems, what's exciting about this is that because information is so ubiquitous, we can all touch it by simply going to the internet and using artificial intelligence, which is at everyone's fingertips. The key question, and this is where the excitement is moving forward, is that if you're willing to think without a box, not outside the box, but without a box, you can leapfrog and you can tap into opportunities, and these are available to literally everyone. Literally everyone. So the reason why these are open to everyone is because of this status quo bias that we all possess. And I'm going to share a couple of insights here around just how entrenched we are around this status quo bias, and when we learn to break out of this, how profoundly exciting it can be for those who make that decision. So the Wall Street Journal did some research. I'm sorry, Harvard Business Review did some research on acquisitions and mergers that are announced at publicly traded companies. And so what they uncovered is that two companies are going to merge, and between 70 to 90% of those acquisitions fail to accomplish the goals that they set out at the time that they announced the acquisition. So hear me clearly, 70 to 90% of them fail to accomplish their goals. And you can hear people after the fact offer all sorts of reasons as to why they failed. But we believe that the main reason was that people are inherently resistant to change. And so you can't get an organization to change if the people inside the organization don't buy into that. And so that's why they're not successful. And we can clearly see that just from the point of view of how hard it is for us as individuals to change. And so I did some, I went and looked at what's the most common day of the year that people make a promise to themselves to change. It's their New Year's resolution. And you know, it's everything from living a healthier life. I'm going to exercise, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to stop smoking, I'm going to begin to exercise, I'm going to change my job, I'm going to get a better relationship. All of these things are things that people say, hey, I want to do. And what percentage of people do you think actually accomplishes the goals that they personally set for themselves? Well, it's only 9%. Only 9% of people actually accomplish that which they personally say that they want to accomplish. And so is it any wonder that corporations, which is simply an accumulation of people, struggles to do the same thing? And then I want to offer up one additional piece of information here on this topic. And I've shared this with folks before, but I want to put the whole thing in context today. Is looking at a situation when people need to change, not just want to change, but need to change. And this, there was a study done at Johns Hopkins dealing with patients that had undergone coronary bypass surgery, and they were given recommendations by their physicians on how they needed to change their habits every day in order to extend their life expectancy. And of these people who were said, if you want to live a longer life, uh, you need to make these changes. And what percentage of those people do you think made the change? Only 11% of them. And so this is what we're dealing with in terms of this leading in an uncertain world is the fact that um, only 9% of people who set a goal for themselves are able to change. Only 11% of people who have a life-threatening circumstance are willing to change. In other words, they're willing to risk dying instead of changing. And corporations are failing at the rate of 70 to 90% of accomplishing what it is that they want to accomplish in order to change. So there's some fundamental challenges that we are inherently embedded with as individuals, but we do know that we have all changed at certain points in our life, and we do know that the organizations, individuals, companies that are more successful are those that have figured this out and have unlocked this quandary, this quandary. And so what I'm going to do here, and I'm going to do this coming back on the second half of the hour, is to walk everyone through what it looks like to actually shift. What do we have to do? And this is an individual shift and it's an organizational shift in order for us to be in a position to accomplish the things that I'm talking about. And so we're going to take this break here at the bottom of the hour and come back. And I'm going to continue this conversation about what does it mean to lead in an uncertain world. And this question of leadership is, while I'm talking about it from an organizational level, when we come back after the break, you'll understand that this is about getting individuals to see the world differently, such that so that organizations can accomplish a lot more. So we'll be back. You're listening to Profiles and Perspectives with Darsweil Rogers. And there are two keys in terms of shift. So two things need to shift. Two things need to shift in order for us to capitalize on the future. I call it evolving organizational mindset through an evolving individual mindset. Okay, an evolving organizational mindset through an evolving individual mindset. And that's because organizations are simply an accumulation of individuals. What I call this from an organizational point of view is the new role for leadership. And it's what I call the new ROI. And ROI traditionally would mean return on investment. But in this particular instance, the new ROI is a return on intelligence. And this is about shifting as a leader from thinking you're the expert and the know-it-all to being the facilitator in the sharing of information across the organization. this comes back to what I discussed earlier in terms of the fact that the knowledge in the world is doubling faster than every 12 hours. So if all the knowledge in the world is doubling it more fast, is doubling every 12 hours or more, then there's no way that you could possibly have all the information that you do as a leader. And so the number one issue for leaders needs to be the development of their people. Staff development, giving them new skills and teaching them how to modify behavior to match whatever is necessary at the time is critical. And I want to emphasize that this is not a one-time shift from, okay, you've been currently doing this job, and now I want you to learn how to do this next job, and then you can go back to being falling asleep and not having to think about what's taking place. No, I'm talking about having an actively engaged mind that is aware of what's taking place and considering whether or not there are additional tweaks, modifications, changes, shifts that are necessary in order to do whatever it is that you've been tasked to do in as effective a way as possible. Okay. So not only do you want to develop these skills in this mindset in your in your existing staff, you literally want to recruit and develop people that have that mindset. And candidly, this is where the educational system should be building competency. The key competency, as I said in one of the early slides, is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. That is the most valuable skill set that anyone can possess moving forward. And so as leaders, you want to develop, support, and empower within your workforce agility and collaboration. Because it's only through, first off, having a mindset that says, hey, there's things taking place that may be relevant. How do I need to shift? How do I need to change? What do I need to do different? But you have to be able to communicate and collaborate with those around you, inside and outside of your organization, if you have any hopes of actually being able to accomplish that. The second thing that leaders have to do is to, in effect, once you've got the individuals thinking this way, you need to ask yourself, how do you get the entire organization to be responsive to change? And I specifically here on this slide focus on the role of human resources, because HR is going to have a lot to do with who and how you hire, what sort of training that they get, and really importantly, how do you compensate people across the organization? If you need everyone to be collaborative and thinking dynamically about what's in the best interest of the organization, you can't have a compensation structure that is solely geared on individual performance. It needs to also think broadly about organizational performance and success and reward people on the basis of how the organization does, and not just how they do as individuals. And so accomplishing this means that we've got this shift to using 21st century thinking and technology versus 19th century. And one of the key examples of this is we have frequently hired people based upon our comfort level with them as an individual, relationships that we have with them or people that we know, connections to some sort of school, college, community, versus does this person have the skill set, the mindset that I need right now? If you think about it from the point of view of a sports team, we'll just take football by way of example. If you need a person with a certain skill set and you see that person, it doesn't matter whether or not they didn't go to your alma mater, or it doesn't, the only thing matters is, can they do the job? And so that sort of mindset, the 19th century mindset would be totally tied to relationships. The 21st century mindset would be, let me do some assessments on this person's intellect, on their flexibility, on their willingness to change, on their ability to do any number of things that would be different than you would have considered in the past. Next, here so what we really are saying here is that we need to invest in people at a new level to survive and thrive. And so what I want to do with the remaining time I've got here is to share with you exactly what do I mean by investing at a new level. And it really comes down to, in its simplest form, thinking about organizations and individuals through the lens of four specific areas. One of them is emotional intelligence. The second one is mental agility. We've discussed a little bit of that so far. The third is open leadership, and we discussed a little bit of that. And then the final one, which virtually no one thinks about, is financial literacy. And so let's take each one of these. So emotional intelligence, what exactly do I mean by emotional intelligence? And for the purpose of this conversation is, what is your capacity to accomplish goals that you set for yourself and stay on track despite setbacks and disappointments? So the individual needs to be able to, you need to do the evaluation of how well are you able to manage your emotional state in a way that you will continue to work on problems and challenges when you emotionally have that fear. Oh, I don't like how I'm feeling, or I may fail, or this may not be successful. So that level of emotional intelligence. And so we need to train ourselves how to operate in this way. And so there's a lot of work that you have to do, that we all have to do, in terms of evaluating, well, when I did succeed in a goal, what did I do? When I didn't succeed in a goal, what did I do? And how do I modify myself, modify my approach, how I emotionally reacted to not succeeding, or how I emotionally reacted to being exposed as having made a failure or not accomplished something. What did I do? How did I react? And let me begin to train myself in a new way, whereby more often than not, I'm going to be able to break through on those disappointments, because I'm pretty sure that all of us can think of some situations, and we can look back on them right now and say, I had that goal. Why did I give up on it? Why didn't I follow through? And you can see today that you had the capacity to do it, but something got in the way. And so what's really important is that we all begin to understand, well, what is that? And let me get better at overcoming it. Because I can promise you, everyone that we look at and we have some pride or some awe, or we celebrate in terms of their successes, i.e. they're famous or successful, they figured out how to overcome disappointments and setbacks. That's why they're where they are. And each one of us has overcome some disappointments and setbacks to get us where we are today. The key is to unlock, what did we do to break through, and let's figure out how to do more of that and less of whatever that was that caused us to stop and give up. So that's all about emotional intelligence. The next element here is mental agility. And I really explain this in a very simplistic way. If something is not working, do something else. Try something else. We continue to have goals, desires, and aspirations to do something different, but we keep getting the same outcome, but we come back and do the same thing again and again and again and again. If something's not working, you have to try something else. And there's tremendous resistance that we all have as human beings. And don't have the time to get into the physiology and the nature of how we are built as humans to do this. So we have to hold on to activities and programs. I'm sorry. We continue to hold on to activities and programs that we know are not working. And so this comes back to, and it ties back into this whole emotional intelligence question. Well, why am I continuing to hold on to this? It didn't work yesterday. It didn't work last week. It didn't work last year. I said I was going to lose weight, by way of example, and here I am, still overweight. So what is it that I continue to do that I should change? What is it that I continue to do so I should change? And then let's do the work internally, this internal work, for me to figure that out. That's really what this is about. And if you take that, if you introduce that and you place that capability into the individuals, then when you begin to talk about organizational challenges, they'll be more willing or more open or geared to do it. Again, using the analogy of a football team, you can say to your linemen, say, look, I need you guys to be a lot stronger. So therefore, I need you all to get into the weight room, and I need you to be able to bench press this and leg press this and do all of these things. Or I need you to have greater ability to improve your quickness. So you train and you take your team through drills whereby they improve their strength, they improve their quickness, or you give them you run them through what if scenarios that have uncertainty around them so that we can begin to get comfortable with the idea that I have to be able to think quickly on my feet. I have to be able to recognize circumstances as they're arising or maybe even anticipate them. This is the level of mental agility. And as individuals, it's no different when you're driving a car. If you're anticipating seeing somebody come from the side and you're beginning to think that guy might come over on me, that level of anticipation is what we're talking about broadening in terms of how we solve and uncover and achieve goals for ourselves as individuals, and then how we can achieve and accomplish those goals from an organizational point of view. The third element here is to provide is open leadership. And so open leadership means that you're providing a whole board view or a holistic view of the organization's challenges and opportunities. You're not keeping those to yourself. One of the uh, common things that people say about senior leaders, CEOs, is that it's lonely at the top. And it absolutely is. I've run several organizations, and it is absolutely lonely at the top, particularly if you're the only person who actually understands what all the challenges are that are taking place. But imagine if you took the mindset of sharing what all the challenges are that the organization has, or what the opportunities are, and the entire team, the entire workforce was also thinking about it. They were understanding what the issues were, and they were thinking about how to solve those problems. So if you've got a group of people, your entire team or your entire organization attempting to solve problems, guess what? Everybody's up at night attempting to figure out the problem, or everybody is sleeping well because you feel like you've got this group that is coming together to attempt to resolve the issues. And in an environment where information knowledge is doubling more than once every 12 hours, and an environment where it is humanly impossible for a small group of people at the top to know all the information, and just think about how long it takes for you to get information, and then you have to analyze information, and then you have to make a decision on that information, and then you have to tell the workforce what it is that you want them to do, and then they have to understand what it is that you want them to do and why you want them to do it, and then for them to actually execute on it. That amount of time is a lose. It's absolutely positively a losing strategy. It can't in an environment where there's so much data that is being transmitted in milliseconds. To think that you can continue to operate, that's a 19th century mindset. That's an industrial revolution mindset. And what I'm talking about applies to all organizations, straight on down to family dynamics. I mean, why don't we tell kids, uh, uh, what the financial condition is of the family, and have them help to solve and resolve issues. So these we're talking about universal opportunities. And when you begin to develop that sort of capability and those sort of muscles at the individual level, at the family level, then the opportunity to have that at the organizational level grows. And so I'm literally saying that the training that organizations give to the workforce needs to be entirely different. You can't expect the school system to do it. You can't expect people to get it on their own because they're overwhelmed. And so this investment in your people, and it being the right people that have the mindset and the desire to learn, is key to unlocking what it is that we're talking about. This is the key to how you lead in a world where there's this level of uncertainty. So here's a stair step model for those of you who can see me on Facebook of what I describe as the strategic planning process with shared consciousness. And shared consciousness means that from the most senior person to the most junior person in the organization, people understand what's going on and they understand why it's happening. So that no matter where you are in the organization, if you see something that might be relevant, might be a challenge or an opportunity, you can see it, you can recognize it, and you can either take action yourself or convey that information in a way that would result or that would result in opportunities being seized or challenges being mitigated. And we start with purpose. I'm not going to go through this entire thing. I encourage anyone who's just listening to me on the radio to go to my Facebook page and take a look at this. But we really start with purpose, which is why we exist. And we go all the way through to evaluating the outcomes and the performance of the organization. When you create this sort of line of sight throughout an organization with shared consciousness, your opportunities for success have grown exponentially. And quite frankly, that's what's necessary in an environment where there is so much change taking place. So the last topic here in these 4 points is financial literacy. And everyone needs to know the score if they're going to impact the outcome. You can't think of, I challenge you to think of any sporting event, any performance, any card game, or any sort of other game that you participated in where everybody involved didn't know what the score was real time during the event. They know what the score is. And so the only way you can impact what takes place is to know the score. And organizationally, we tend not to tell people what the score is. They don't know where the financials are. And even inside government, inside government, what is it that you're actually trying to accomplish? And how does what I'm doing every day play into what that long-term goal is? And how well are we doing at accomplishing it? Why don't we share this information broadly across organizations? It is a mindset that goes back to a simpler time. I go back to the old Henry Ford scenario. Henry Ford said that with the Model T, he says you can have any color you want so long as it's black. He saw no need to make a different color. He saw no need to change anything about what he was cranking out. So therefore, the only person that needed to do any thinking in the organization was him. Everybody else just needed to stick the widget where he wanted them to stick the wheel on when the assembly line came by. And even though the world has changed significantly, and we clearly don't, in most cases, have people do things that rudimentarily tied, the ideas of not giving people the whole perspective still presents itself. And so that really is it. These 4 key areas: emotional intelligence, mental agility, open leadership, and financial literacy is what will unlock and transform any organization. It's the level of investment that we should be making in people. It is the level, and it's the opportunity. And as you will note, nothing I said requires a whole lot of investment financially. So this is something that you can that you can begin to capitalize on as an individual. You can begin to capitalize on it as a small business. And if you'd like to know a lot more about this, that this is fundamentally sort of work that we do, and we are always interested to talk to more people about how to do that. And so I encourage folks to reach out anytime.